In this video, we're going to talk about workplace productivity with Daniel C. He's a productivity expert and author, smart guy, and this is going to help you and your employees. Hi there, I'm Andrea Adams and the host of the HR Hub. On the show, you get expert insight into all things HR. I encourage you to subscribe to the show or podcast to keep learning from my guests. Today, I am again talking to Daniel C. Daniel is a diverse and super interesting guy. He's a former physiotherapist. He is a productivity consultant. He's an author. He's written 2 books now, both of which interested me. He wrote Spacemaker, How to Unplug, Unwind, and Think Clearly in the Digital Age, which has won awards. But today, we're going to talk about productivity. Daniel, I mean, your career is just so interesting. You start out as a kinesiologist, or sorry, not a kinesiologist, a physiotherapist, and then you move into productivity. How does that even happen?
Yeah, it happens by accident. I remember I was a physiotherapist at the time, and I was also doing some volunteer work with my church, and I'd done a project management diploma as well. So I was playing around with a number of fields. And I actually went to a career counselor because I felt frustrated and a bit stuck. And we worked out that I really liked training people and I liked starting new things, which was helpful. Although they weren't very helpful because they said you'll never make any money in either of them, which I think is strange in retrospect. But I remember just becoming really passionate about the way we work, and particularly about making space, realizing that busyness and frantic activity is just part of the world we live in, that there's a lot of information, but there's not a lot of habit change. And essentially what I realized as a physiotherapist is I have all the skills to help people with workplace habit change, because physiotherapy is essentially about changing people's physical habits and their mindsets around health. Yeah. And all the research and methodology around changing your health is actually exactly the same when it comes to changing people's personal habits and productivity habits, whether it be email or lists or disconnecting from their devices to be more productive. So in that sense, there was a natural flow. Yeah. But yeah, in terms of how it actually happened, I basically ran a course called Email Ninja for a few friends to how to get your inbox to zero, because I was frustrated that people's inbox was so bad. And I'd done a lot of reading, as a geek would, on email research, and I realized that there were better ways of doing it. Okay. And then one of them said, why don't you run a course? So I asked our local training provider, there's me and another guy who I started the company with, Tim. We said, we have no skills in training, no formal qualifications, but would you let us run a course to help you get your inbox to zero? And they said, if we get 8 people, then yes, they'll run the course. And we got 8 people exactly. And the course ran, and it just grew from there until the point where I was working most nights and after work to coach clients who were asking me to coach them in their inbox management. And I had this thing that it was like, well, we have to make a decision.
Yeah. As I said in the Spacemaker, because you and I did that other episode, that I have experience with the Spacemaker training, but I don't have any with the Email Ninja. In under 2 minutes, can you give us any tips on how to manage our inbox?
Yeah, sure. Actually, the funny thing was we literally just came up with Email Ninja as a name. I mean, I wasn't really starting a business. It was a bit of a joke, and I was drinking whiskey with my mate, and we said, let's call it Email Ninja. But because that name caught on so well, we now have List Assassin and Priority Samurai, Meeting Dojo. So it pretty much shaped all of our productivity suite just because we had whiskey one night, but it worked well. So Email Ninja is basically the idea that we are using our email a lot, and that most of us don't know how to manage higher volume email, which is a different idea than just knowing how to use Outlook. It's about having the habits and the practices to think differently about the way we manage the information through email. And it is essentially an inbox zero course. How might you get your inbox to zero each day and spend less time on email? And so some quick tips. Firstly, don't think about your email inbox more like your post box at home, where you wouldn't necessarily work from your post box. Information comes in, but you wouldn't open up letters, hopefully, and bills, and then put them back in the post box and keep moving them in and out in order to manage open but not completed kind of
Right.
bills that need to
Right.
be paid, you take them out and you put them hopefully somewhere where you can manage them. So the first step of email ninja is to think about your inbox like a letterbox where stuff comes in. You then need to take it out, put it into particular workflows where you can manage your email in batch tasking type ways to be productive, rather than have this kind of mess of read and unread and flagged and unflagged emails where you re-email yourself when you lose an email off the screen. All this kind of
Oh,
behavior that is
yeah.
just not very effective.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do that, you need to have 3 folders. Particularly, you need an action folder, which is like your to-do list of emails that take more than 2 minutes to complete. You need a reading folder, which is for stuff you might like to read one day but don't have to read, and a waiting folder, which is for stuff you've delegated and that you're awaiting a response. And then obviously you need a killer archive, a very, very simple, streamlined archive setup so you're not wasting your time with hundreds of folders on the left side, and then delete. And so if you have a workflow, and then if you have habits and practices to reduce addiction by reducing notifications, and a system for spending less time on the wrong emails, well, then it doesn't make email simple, because emails are always going to be difficult if you get like 80, 100 plus emails a day. But it absolutely, it frees up your mind, and it helps you to know where things are, and it helps you to stop duplicating effort in the wrong ways.
Right.
And so some skills training works.
Backing up a little bit from email, when you're talking in a larger sense, when you're talking about productivity, how does that relate to organizations and the individuals in them?
When I became a productivity consultant, which is still funny because,
It is funny.
when I became a consultant, I mean,
I can agree with you there.
it's a made up name. I mean, I remember saying to my business partner, I'd been a physiotherapist for 4 years and all the degrees and all this stuff. And then we became a productivity consultant, and we literally made up a name and put it in LinkedIn, and we were suddenly one of those people. But when I started that, I thought productivity was about being efficient and having skills like how to get your inbox to zero and how to manage
Yeah, that's what I think, actually.
Yeah. And I don't think that anymore. I think those skills are useful, but essentially now I realize that productivity is not about efficiency, particularly not in the digital age, because you can be as efficient as possible and you'll never get everything done. There will still be more than you can possibly complete on a Friday. There's more information to read, more emails to process, just more Netflix episodes to watch than you'll ever finish. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think productivity is actually a much deeper and actually more spiritual question. It's about knowing where you're heading in life and who you are, what your strengths are. And so basically having a deep sense of self-awareness and a deep sense of knowing why you're here and what you need to achieve next. And then aligning your habits and practices to who you want to be and who you feel you are. And so in that sense, it's not about getting things done. Productivity is about getting the right things done with the right intentionality, I would say. But the only way you can get the right things done is if you have enough time and space to reflect on what your bigger real goals are in work and life, and what's the character and personality that you want to have, and what's the texture of the relationships that you would love to see, and therefore retrofitting and intentionally shaping your habits and patterns and skills individually and actually corporately when you run organizations, so that they align with where you want to be. And that's what productivity is, which is way more exciting than, how do you do a 2-level list and tick stuff off?
I mean, basically that's it almost sounds like discover yourself. Do you have a discover yourself course aside from Email Ninja?
Yes. So Priority Samurai definitely moves that direction, because
okay, all right.
You can't set priorities unless you know who you are and what your goals are, and then have the skills and practices to retrofit it. So I do that to us, like that gets us in that direction for large teams. But then I run a productivity masterclass coaching for 5 to 6 people, which we do over 6 months, which goes more into who am I and what do I want to achieve? And then how do I break that into projects and tasks? And then how do I actually activate that day by day so that I can achieve the stuff I need to achieve?
Okay. So what are some of the, are there essential skills that employers need to teach their employees about productivity?
Again, I would answer that differently than I would have answered it 5 years ago. So
Okay.
5 years ago, I would have said you need to teach your employees to manage themselves really well with the skills to get the right things done. I still believe that. So
Yeah.
that is, if they use a lot of email, teach them how to use email well. If they run projects, give them really great project management skills, teach them how to organize themselves using a to-do list system, use a getting things done methodology so that people can clear their head and actually just remove all the clutter from their mind and organize themselves in a kind of a comprehensive way. So the personal organizational skills that we need to lead ourselves and therefore lead our teams. And that includes how do you time block your calendar so that you've got spaces for what matters for you as well as others.
Okay. Yeah.
How do you organize your calendar? How do you organize your lists, and how do you organize your email? They're the three things I think make a big difference. But the reason I wouldn't say that is the lead anymore is I think even before you get to that, now we need to help people make space from digital distraction, because you can have all those skills, and yet if you never disconnect, if you can't unplug and have time to think deeply, to build relationships, or even to rest mentally, not just physically, to disconnect from tech and the exhaustion of always filling your mind with online activity, well, then that's kind of a precursor for being able to work well. Because if you can't think clearly, if you can't sleep well, if you can't rest deeply, and if you can't know what matters anymore in terms of your priorities, well, then all those efficiency skills just lead you to the wrong place faster. I love Stephen Covey's quote from First Things First. He says, if the ladder is against the wrong wall, well, then every step you take up the ladder takes you to the wrong place faster. And the problem is we're becoming such a distracted, instant, reactive society full of notifications and Twitter feeds that we don't know who we are anymore, and we don't know what our calling is. We don't know why we exist in this world, or what our dreams are and what our ideas are. We're filling our minds so much with other people's ideas that we don't have our own ideas, or we don't know how to process those ideas and apply them into our own context.
We're just so uncomfortable with the space where you would spend that time thinking about it, that you avoid it and you go back to your device to just avoid it and never have that exploration at all.
We avoid, and it's a cycle, because it's painful to experience our own thoughts and to be silent, because then the painful feelings and emotions and things we haven't processed pop up. And so we distract ourselves with technology, just like an alcoholic would distract themselves with alcohol, and it does help. It reduces the pain, it numbs us, so it's a coping mechanism, and I respect that. Life is hard right now, so we need the coping mechanism, but like alcoholism, the coping mechanism creates the problem as well. And therefore we don't have the space to actually know ourselves, and therefore we end up in this cycle. So yes, it is hard. And so I think productivity involves unplugging and learning once more to be at peace with our own mind, our own thoughts, and to put the self-work in, to have a sense of where we want to head, and then learn the efficiency skills to get there. So I think we just have to go back a step.
Have you talked about the relationship between technology and productivity?
I did last time, but I can very briefly, we talked about it being an upside down curve where...
yes, go over that. I think that point bears repeating.
Yeah, so if we map productivity against technology, it's not a linear relationship where more technology makes you endlessly productive. It's an upside down curve that you see in all biological systems, actually, where you need technology to be productive, and then you hit a plateau, which I call the productive middle, and then you slide down the right-hand side of the curve into digital overuse, where you become wired and tired, and you're doing more, and you're ticking more off your list, but it's the wrong stuff because you don't know who you are and you don't know where you're heading, or you have just become so wired and cyborg-like that there's something about the way you are that impacts your ability to lead a healthy team. And that's called digital overuse. And so So the relationship between technology and productivity is that we need two sets of habits. So we've talked about some on the left, how to use your inbox well, how to set priorities, how to use your calendar. That makes you more productive, as well as, how to use WordPress and I don't know, Trello and all the other technologies that you need to do your job well. But then on the right-hand side of the curve, the only way for us to be productive nowadays is to learn a new set of skills, which is to learn how to rest, learn how to unplug, to think deeply, and learn how to reconnect with people in our lives in real ways. And that is totally new. There has never been a situation in history where we've had to learn to have friendships with real people, or where we've had to learn to actually not always be on the internet. And it's, I'm doing a TED talk next month on making space, and a TEDx, I'm sorry. And, I meant to find an idea worth sharing. And my idea is that we should unplug from our devices to live a good life. I mean, in some ways, it's a ridiculous idea to be speaking about. It's absurd that like executives who earn, $200,000 a year pay me to teach them to turn off their phone. But in reality, it is a set of skills we need nowadays, because we're losing what it means to be fully human and productive. And the secret is to make space more regularly as a pattern.
What are some of the most prevalent misconceptions about productivity at an organizational level?
Look, I've probably mentioned it already. I think it's that productivity is about efficiency and getting more done. I do like Oliver Burkeman's work. It's not very practical, but it's fantastic from a philosophical perspective. He writes about the philosophy of time in 4,000 weeks. And he says in that book that we have 4,000 weeks. That's the human life, if you get a good life. And what do you do with it? And what he said is that we're no longer at a point in time where we're even prioritizing the good things and the dumb things. We're so busy, we're prioritizing one good thing from the next good thing. And that's a new situation for us. I've just over-talked myself. What was your question again?
Well, no, I was just saying misconceptions around productivity.
That's right.
Yes.
Misconceptions about productivity. So he again would say that productivity is not efficiency, because you can be incredibly efficient in that myopic day-by-day point of view. But if you don't think from a 4,000 week perspective, well, then you might discover that you've been incredibly efficient living the wrong life. Living a life that someone else has given you and following the scripts of culture or the scripts of commercialism or whatever it is
just buying into, like, caving into the addictiveness of your technology, and you're living a life buried in, not to flog a dead horse, but Candy Crush or whatever it is.
Absolutely. Candy Crush, that's right. Or even like, my daughter wants to get a tattoo, which is, she can when she's 18, I've said, but so she can be an individual, like every other teenager. Do you know what I mean? There's this sense where even our individualism has been scripted, and in that sense, I think, again, it's not. I don't want to come across negatively at all, because all of this technology is incredible, and I'm speaking to you from the other side of the world,
which is
using
really
technology.
Amazing.
Truth be told, I'm wearing Ugg boots right now. How cool is that? I get to wear Ugg boots at work. Like, none of that happened before technology. So it's not that technology is bad, but we need to put it within the context of who we are and how we want to live. That's what productivity is. And the same for organizations. We need to put it in the context of, what do we want to achieve as a team? What do we want to be known for in the next year, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? Not make a 10-year strategic plan, but have a sense of, the impact we want to put into the world. Once we know those things, well, then technology has its place and efficiency has its place, because it helps us get there. But unless you put the time in to think deeply, to really reflect strategically, to know your strengths and to know where you're heading, then that activity and that efficiency can actually be counterproductive rather than productive.
Employers, of course, are going to be interested in productivity. How can employers enable productivity in their employees?
I mean, it's a huge question.
It is a huge question. Okay, so where do we start?
You know the expression, if you've got a hammer, then everything you see is like a nail. So I mean,
Yes.
I'm a
Yes.
trainer and a productivity consultant. So my nail is that I think training is actually important
Yeah.
to train people in the essential skills to use tech well and to make space from tech. But there are so many different ways to approach it, and so there's really no simple answer. I think when I go into an organization and chat with a person, a leadership team about the culture that they want to set, if I have enough time with that team, well, then I'll have a sense of, okay, well, their biggest issue is that they really need to spend more time investing in the relationships, and having critical conversations, or maybe, drawing out, having strength-based conversations with their teams. Or it may be that actually, their systems are completely everywhere, and actually you need better systems to help people. I work with a global corporate which grows so fast, like so unbelievably fast across multiple countries, that one of their leaders said it's like we're nice on the outside, but we're spaghetti on the inside. And it was so true. Beautiful on the outside in terms of branding and customer experience,
Yes.
complete chaos inside. So they really needed to spend more time slowing down and consolidating and improving their systems so that the growth could catch up. So I don't know. I don't really have a one size fits all answer for how might you embed productivity in your organization. The only foolproof answer that I would say to everyone is that if I'm speaking to a leadership or a manager, an executive or a team of leaders, you always must start with yourself. That's the only thing I would always say, because the culture you create will be a representation of who you are and how you work. And so you can tell people to disconnect from email after work, but if you're then emailing them at 10 o'clock every night, well, your actions speak louder than your words.
Yes, they do.
And so all I would say is you still need to start with reflecting on yourself and your habits. How do you as a team take time out to think deeply about where you're heading? How do you reflect on the way you work, not just what you're working on? And is there enough time to invest in relationships individually and together around you? If you can do that, that's a great start for then trying to unravel and tackle the corporate culture around you.
Where can someone learn more about, well, we mentioned two here, Priority Samurai and Email Ninja, and we touched on Spacemakers as well. Where could someone learn about these and find out more information?
So we have a website, spacemakers.com.au. And Alyssa, who you may have met in the last episode, is our Canadian trainer and consultant. And we will have a Canadian website up probably next month, which will be Spacemaker Group. CA.
That's us here, CA.
Took a while for me to get there. But in the meantime, go to my Australian website. We obviously run training in Canada, face-to-face. We run training online around the world. And there's a lot more information that you can get in my books as well for being a spacemaker, or if you're a parent, how to raise tech healthy humans. It's a different arm altogether, but there's a lot there as well if you're interested. Okay,
thanks, Daniel. That was such a privilege. This was just such necessary content, in my opinion. I did another episode, as Daniel mentioned, with Daniel and Alyssa, and the link to that is right here. Thanks for watching out there. See you next time.